Hello everyone, I'm Mahir Gazdar and I'm here to tell you a story from my life about how a traumatic experience can turn into a blessing. So first of all, I need to tell you a bit about myself. I'm an English teacher and I'm from the UK, but I was born in the small desert country of Kuwait, which is in the Middle East. My father was working there as an architect. I also happen to be the youngest of 4 brothers, and I had a normal childhood just like everybody else. So I enjoyed all sorts of things like going out and seeing others, playing football, enjoying life. I didn't really think about the future much. I was just enjoying life at the moment. So I used to come back from school by bus, along with other children. I used to come back in the afternoon. But on one particular day, that was 30th January 1988, that was only 2 days before my 6th birthday, I was coming back from school by bus, and they dropped me off opposite to my home for whatever reason. So I was left to cross the road by myself. I looked straight ahead and I saw there was clear looking around. I started crossing, but I never made it across that day. That's because I never noticed the car that hit me, and it broke off a very large portion of my skull, about the size of the palm of my hand. So it was quite big. It was a very unpleasant experience. It was actually quite a traumatic experience. But over the years, my opinion has changed, and I've started to see that experience as a blessing. That's not a very common opinion, but in order to understand why, I need to guide you through the journey of recovery. The first memory I had after I regained consciousness was the blue floor tiles that I saw across the floor. That was some time, and it was very confusing, and I couldn't remember the moments after it. I also just remember looking to the side and I saw my parents, but I couldn't hear them. They were smiling at me. Later I found out that the reason for that was that I was in a life support machine for 3 weeks. They took me out of the machine, and during that time when I was in the machine, I actually had lots of tubes going in and out of my body. In fact, I heard my mother say that the first thing I did after I came out of the machine was I pulled the tube out of my nose. I was being tube fed through my nose since I was unconscious for so long and in a coma. I wasn't the same though. So my left arm was paralyzed. If I lifted it, then I let go, it would just drop. Also, I had hemiparesis, so I couldn't walk. And I had all sorts of treatment to follow up on everything. I had physiotherapy, neurology, blood tests. It's like you name it, I had it. All the different sorts of treatment. There was even one treatment that I had which was very different. I sat down in a nice comfortable chair with the doctor, and my parents were there as well. I didn't know what to expect. It was a nice chair, but that was until they put lots of electrodes on my face and they ran electricity through it. Saying that it was painful would be an understatement. That was actually because the left half of my face was paralyzed, and that's why I didn't really smile much at that time, not like I used to. So it was to make my face look more natural. And it was like I had aged a lot more, because I found other children my age quite childish after that. My character had changed. Sometime later, the nurse came and she put some plastic at the back of my head over here. So they closed my head and I was actually discharged from hospital. I only had a few minor differences after that. Like, for example, I gained a lot of weight. I was roughly twice the width of the other classmates that I had at the time, not like other children. And it's like I took an early retirement from sports. I was exempt from all sports at school, and I didn't participate in that. It's almost like I was just sitting at the side or somewhere in the background. But apart from that, I thought everything was over, but I was wrong. One of the most noticeable or memorable moments during my childhood was when I was 9 years old in the UK. So I woke up on Saturday morning and I was looking forward to enjoying the weekend and perhaps going downstairs watching some television. But when I went downstairs, I could hear some loud ringing in my ear, and I couldn't hear what anybody was saying. I could see them talking to me or even shouting at me, but I couldn't hear anything at all. I was afraid that I had gone completely deaf, and I started panicking at that time. I didn't know what to do. They tried to distract me, maybe with some toys or maybe some television, but that didn't mean anything to me at that time. I just wanted to hear again. So eventually they called the doctor on emergency call out on a Saturday, and he gave me some eardrops, and that helped. So I was just thankful that I could hear again. I continued with school and I did quite well, and I even made it to college. So I was doing everything else in regular school, just like other children and other teenagers at the time as well. Maths, chemistry, science, everything. I even did drama. So at that time I could enjoy acting and I could enjoy being a villain. I found being a hero too boring. I was exempt from sports as well, just like I was before, but somehow I ended up doing taekwondo. It was actually much safer than I thought. It wasn't as dangerous as other things as football. And that was quite normal at that time. Nothing really serious happened, although I was quite hesitant. Probably the most serious case was when I was doing that with somebody. We were fighting against each other, but he got a little overexcited. He came a bit close to me and he punched me in my face for real. So that didn't really hurt actually, but what was more painful was seeing my glasses fly off and break. But that was quite safe apart from that. As I was around the age of 17, I could learn how to drive, which is something that a lot of people look forward to at that age. So I started learning how to drive, and it was a nice feeling trying to move from the passenger seat to the driver's seat, but it wasn't all easy. I actually found it quite scary, partly because of my accident, but also there was a lot more to it than I realized. My instructors would tell me things like, look up, watch the road, check the speed, shift the gear. It was more scary to me than a roller coaster ride. It was quite scary, and I had another sort of problem. Whenever I went somewhere, somehow I'd just forget everything. It's like I would just see something, and 2 seconds later I'd forget everything that I did. So I kept repeating the same mistake. And that got people quite annoyed. But I continued, and eventually I passed, but on my 7th attempt. Well, better late than never, I guess. And also I did well at university. I met people from all over the world, and I did well with my studies. I graduated from university. But then after that, the real challenge was after that when I started working. As I realized, just telling somebody to be more confident doesn't actually make them more confident. So when I used to go for job interviews, that was quite noticeable that I was very underconfident, and that didn't help. So I found a lot of difficulty in getting any sort of job at that time. I got some work though, but it wasn't the perfect sort of work. At some point, I ended up in what was like a dark cloud in my mind. So it wasn't really a dark cloud, but I had all sorts of dark, intrusive thoughts which I didn't want to have. Feeling things like, for example, that I was a burden on others, or perhaps how good life would have been for everybody around me if I never survived my accident. It was a very dark time, but I tried to reassure myself. And one of the quotations that I found quite helpful was a hadith or saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was that no fatigue, nor disease, nor distress, nor sadness, nor sorrow, nor hurt befalls a Muslim, even if it were the prick of a thorn, except that he has some of his sins forgiven because of that. So I hope that if I've missed out on something, that maybe one day I might be given something better. So I continued his life as best as I could. A key turning point for me was when I got married. So I was blessed with an amazingly supportive wife who supported me in all areas of my life, including a lot of emotional support. She also helped me with other areas, such as with writing. So I had an interest with writing before, but because I was so underconfident, I actually wrote my first book at the age of 20, but I never published it. And later she saw my book. She has an interest in reading and she was wondering what to read next. So I showed her a copy of that. I told her, don't tell anyone. But she directly said to me, I won't do that. And that turned out to be a blessing actually, because after that I continued writing. I got back into it, and now I have about 10 books that have been published. And over that time, a few months later, I managed to get my first English teaching position in Saudi Arabia. So I moved there and I gained a lot of independence. I was also able to work with many other people, and I worked all over the country. It was a very interesting experience, and I've written books about those as well. Also, I managed to get my own car. Do you believe it? I was starting to drive by myself, and there were even some times when I gave lifts to others as well. I still didn't see my accident as a blessing after all that time, and that changed when I was working in the small city of Baha, which is a mountainous city, and I was working there as part of a team. So one day we had some training for coaching, that was not teaching, and I was talking with others. We all had a training session where everybody had to talk about a key turning point in their life. And when it was my turn to speak, I was actually a bit hesitant at first, but seeing how well I got to know everybody, I told them about my accident, and they were shocked. It was almost like they were speechless. So during that time, our trainer, who was a very experienced coach at the time, he suggested that maybe one day I should write a book about it, because of my experiences. And I suggested maybe one day I could do a TED Talk. I had no idea that 7 years later I would actually be delivering a TEDx speech. You see, in the Arabic language, they have a very interesting word for human. That's the word insan. And that actually means the one who forgets. You see, all too often we tend to forget about all of the things that we have around us, all of the blessings and all the things that we have. Sometimes we don't even notice them. For example, some people, they've been blessed with perfect health, but then they start smoking or they start taking recreational drugs. And also other people like that. A lot of women, for example, they've been blessed with a lot of natural beauty, but they're still not happy. They have cosmetic surgery. But in my case, I've always had something, like some sort of medical problem or some other sort of problem. So in that sense, I feel that my accident was a blessing, because if I didn't have that, maybe I might not have been thankful. Whenever I have a problem, then once I get better, I start to feel thankful. So I'm always reminded that I'm not perfect. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I ended up as a teacher, because I want to help others just like I received so much help myself. I needed help with all areas of my life. With walking, with doing other activities, studying. so I want to help others in some way as well. But it brings another question to mind. How many more blessings do we have around us that we tend to forget about or not even notice? Finally, I would like to leave you with just a simple idea. So how can everything that I've just mentioned during this presentation be useful to you? So what I recommend you do is, if you make a list, think of what kind of problems you had and think of what you actually have. So maybe that way, if you compare the two, you'll notice a difference. But try to focus more on what you have rather than what you don't have. You'll be a lot more thankful then. Maybe then you'll also see many blessings. Thank you.